Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise this evening to pursue a question that I initially put to the Prime Minister on March 1st. It relates to an issue that I think is increasingly worrying to many Canadians, regardless of how they voted. And this is not a partisan issue, and I want to set that out as a foundation. I think that, and I include in my statement of nonpartisan interest in this issue, that I don't believe for a moment that Conservative candidates in ridings where there were alleged dirty tricks, those people, I have great affection for many of them, and I don't think there's a chance that they would have known about the voter suppression techniques that were used in the election that took place May 2nd of 2011. So with that context out of the way, I think I want to pursue the question I asked March 1st, and it was this. In the context of the voter suppression phone calls, some people call them robocalls, but I think we need to understand it as multiple acts of illegal activity. Each single phone call purporting to be Elections Canada when it was not Elections Canada represents a crime. It's a crime on two levels. It's a crime against our fair, democratic, free elections under the Elections Act. It's also a crime under the Criminal Code purporting to be someone you're not for purposes of fraud. So it's criminal activity that occurred multiple times in multiple ridings. That's the context. You can call them robocalls, but it's election fraud we're discussing. Well, my question to the Prime Minister back March 1st dealt with the fact that I'm personally aware of extensive evidence of electoral fraud that occurred in Saanich-Gulf Islands, the riding I now represent, in the election in which I was not a candidate, the one in 2008, in which the New Democratic Party filed complaints, the Liberal Party filed complaints, public interest groups like Democracy Watch filed complaints, third-party groups that were concerned about the election fraud also filed complaints. And yet, despite a lot of evidence, the RCMP and Elections Canada were unable to get to the bottom of it, which is why I don't think we are yet on the right track to get to the bottom of what happened May 2nd of 2011. And this is not suggesting malfeasance on anyone's part. It's just the reality that I look at what happened, and let me tell you what happened, and the failure to get to the bottom of that leads me to an inevitable conclusion that the Prime Minister must call a public inquiry that's properly funded and has subpoena powers and a proper staff to find out how election fraud took place in 2008 in Saanich-Gulf Islands and across Canada May 2nd, 2011. The reality is this. Calls were made in Saanich-Gulf Islands at the last minute, the night before the election, only to those voters who supported the New Democratic Party. How this unknown, mysterious calling program got the phone numbers of people, as far as I know, only supporting the NDP. The call purported to be from the NDP, and it urged people to go out and vote NDP. What would be strange about that? There was no NDP candidate on the ballot. The name remained, but the candidate had withdrawn. These were spoof calls, as we now know the term, in that the phone number that appeared on the call display was actually the number, a home fax number, for an executive within the NDP who filed complaints. Now, with the information they had, they pursued it. He was initially told to go to the Saanich police and complain there. Then he went to the RCMP. Nothing was discovered because it was not properly investigated. With issues this important, must we not have a full public inquiry? I asked for a full public inquiry from Elections Canada in May of last year and have still not had a response, Mr. Speaker. I asked the Conservative Party representatives here tonight to explain how we're going to get to the bottom of this if we don't have an inquiry.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Human Resources and Skills Development.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I will remind the member that we are here within the Parliament. This is not about parties. This is about speaking to each other as parliamentarians. We are the government here. Thank the member from Saanich-Gulf Island for her question. As the government has stated numerous times in this House regarding issues like this and of the most recent issues, we want Elections Canada's investigations to go ahead regarding the most recent events. But regarding concerns the member may have for previous elections that she's raised tonight, I would encourage her to follow up with Elections Canada.
The honourable member for Saanich-Gulf Islands.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I appreciate the Parliamentary Secretary's invocation that we are parliamentarians here. We are, and as a parliamentarian, I'm part of the government. And that's the difficulty we have. When we mess up our language and refer to opposition parties and government parties, we defy the traditions of Westminster parliamentary democracy. I speak here as a member of the Green Party, leader of the Green Party, and I speak to my honourable friend. She is a representative of the Conservative Party in the Government of Canada. And once again, I say taking it up with Elections Canada is an inadequate response to a serious problem. In 2011, we know there were dozens of ridings in which election frauds took place. And I find it shocking, absolutely shocking, that representatives of any party in this House are so little concerned, so little troubled, that they would leave it to Elections Canada, particularly when Budget 2012 cuts Elections Canada's budget by $7.5 million, further compromising any ability of that agency to get to the bottom of criminal activity.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I think this government has expressed its significant concern with any of these types of issues. Just as we have said, we would encourage and we want Elections Canada to go ahead with investigations on the most recent issues. But regarding something that happened quite significantly in the past, as I've mentioned to the member already this evening in the House, I would encourage her to speak with Elections Canada.